Today we are doing the Goth Music Tag, which was started, I believe, by Kai Decadence. I will have that video linked in the description below in case you want to do this yourself. And I have been kind of putting this off because it isn't really relevant to my channel, because this is more about your history with goth music and the music that you've liked, and that is totally irrelevant to the subject of goth in Latin America, other than the fact that most of the goths I know and have known throughout my life have been Latino, but most of the bands, with one exception, are not, that I'm going to mention here. And also, I feel like some of you might be a little disappointed in me because I have the most basic taste in goth music that you will have ever seen. Like, you see the music that I post, it seems unusual because it's from a part of the world that's mostly ignored. But the stuff that I've been listening to for most of my life, pretty much up until I started this blog, is just so basic goth. Like, you will just predict bands before I say them because it's the same bands that every other basic boring goth likes. But anyways, enough about that. Let's get started with this. Who is the first goth band you ever listened to? Knowingly was Susie and the Banshees, because it was back in the early 2000s, and my dad was being a naughty boy, and he got Napster, and he decided to re-download all of the music that he had bought on record that he no longer had or just wanted to have not on record. And back in the day, he was a big new waver, and he liked some goth music too. And one of his favorite bands from back in the day was Susie and the Banshees. And on their cover album, Through the Looking Glass, they did a cover of Trust in Me from the Jungle Book, which was, when I was a little kid, one of my favorite movies. Like, I destroyed that VHS, so he played that for me, and I liked it a lot. And then a few years later, or a year later, I don't know how much, because I don't remember when the Napster years were, he also had some other songs that I was listening to, and one of them was Face to Face from Batman Returns, because I was a Tim Burton fan, and he's like, "Oh, this was in Batman Returns." And then, so eventually he made me my own little best of Susie and the Banshees CD. And so that was that. That was the first goth band I ever knowingly listened to. I may have heard others, because like I said, my dad liked a lot of new wave music, and that included some other goth bands, but that's the first one that I have distinct memories of listening to. How are you introduced to goth music? My dad. The same as last one. My dad liked new wave back in the day, and there's a lot of crossover between new wave and goth. So through him, I heard a lot of goth music, or some goth music. He wasn't a huge goth music fan. He even mentioned that there were some bands, he's like, "Oh yeah, I kind of stopped listening to them once they started getting a little too dark." But what's kind of interesting is, he taught a few different grades. Elementary school at a K through 8, which I went to for middle school, and I took music appreciation. And because he's a big music person, he decided, "Oh, to prepare you for this class, let's have like themed genres every week when we drive to school." And the week that stood out to me most was Goth Week. So that's how I was introduced to goth music officially. 3. What was your first impression of goth music? I was a fan. I liked it. Favorite originating goth band? First wave goth music. Bauhaus, because I am basic. Favorite goth subgenre that can actually be defined? Probably either death rock or cold wave at this point in my life, with a runner-up being goth gaze, which is, I guess, the most controversial opinion I have, because that's the only thing I've gotten a significant amount of response back that hasn't been totally positive. Favorite era of goth music? Either the 80s, the early stuff, or the present, actually. I'm a big fan of a lot of the present goth music. I'm really not into the 2000s, like before the 2010s, because it's kind of funny because that's when I was in middle school and high school, and I did not like it. I only liked old stuff. And, well, except for new stuff that was being made by older bands, of course. And then 90s, I don't know, I thought it was boring. And I'm getting more into that now, the whole ethereal thing that was big in the 90s. Uh, 7. Top 5 favorite goth bands. Christian Death, because Bauhaus, because I'm basic. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, because I'm slightly less basic. Alien Sex Fiend, they're middle of basicness. And the most basic of them all, the Sisters of Mercy. 8. Top 3 goth albums. The Sky's Gone Out by Bauhaus. Catastrophe Ballet by Christian Death. And for number 3, I'm probably going to have to say Tender Prey by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Favorite goth songs, at least 5. Ooh, this is going to be kind of hard. The Three Shadows, Part 2 by Bauhaus. Not Part 1, not Part 3, specifically Part 2. The Drowning by Christian Death. That's actually my favorite song of all time. Melt by Susie and the Banshees. I can't believe I listened to that song when I was a youngin'. That's very inappropriate. The Weeping Song by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. Lucretia, My Reflection by Sisters of Mercy, because as I mentioned, I am very basic. Now I'm Feeling Zombified by Alien Sex Fiend, more because of I have some nostalgic connections to that song more than anything, I think, because I was into it during my zombie phase. Some more controversial picks. Lullaby by The Cure, which I know some people are like, oh, they're not goth. They're dark pop new wave, and they went through a goth phase. Well, Lullaby is a goth song. And so long as we're going with bands that people can't decide if they're actually goth or just new wave or something and went through a goth phase, pretty much anything by Depeche Mode. Because I know people can't decide, like, oh, are they goth? Are they new wave and went through a goth phase? Are they just new wave? Well, if we're going to say they're goth, then anything by them, they're one of my favorite bands of all time. Whether they're goth or not, I don't care. Is there a goth band you couldn't get into? I'm kind of drawing a blank right now on specific bands, but Witch House. That's not a band. That's a genre, a new subgenre of goth. So I kind of don't want to name any band specifically because they're all new, and I don't want to trash them. But anything that is Witch House, I'm sorry, I don't like it. And it is goth, I think. It's sort of, you see this a lot when it comes to social discussions of goth. People try to wash away issues by saying, oh, that person's not a real goth, and that ends it. But the much more difficult discussion is this person who is a goth has some issues, and that is a problem within our community that we need to acknowledge. And in the case of music, yes, Witch House is, according to my own definitions of what makes goth music, it is goth music. And I do not like it. And that is an issue within my personal community within myself. Like, yeah, it has the goth elements with the minor chords and the bass and all that, but it's also got like auto-tune and stuff. And, I should love this because I'm glad to see people finally doing something new. I love the idea of it. I like that people are doing something new with goth music because a big complaint some people have had is the fact that it all sounds the same and people aren't doing anything new. They're just trying to recreate 80s bands. And here are some people doing something new and different. And I just hear it and think, no, I do not like this. But then again, as I mentioned, I am a basic goth. I like basic goth music. I do not like Witch House. If you like Witch House, good for you. But we will not be listening to the same music together. We will be doing other things together, but not listening to music. At least as long as it's Witch House. 11. Favorite iconic goth female lead singer? Huh. Well, everyone's probably saying Susie, so I should pick something new and different. I guess Eva O and Gitani Demone because I've actually seen them live and they were both very good. And Eva O is relevant here because she is a Latina, so yay. Number 12, thoughts on Andrew Eldritch. He's fine. Okay, musically, as I mentioned, I am a fan of Sisters of Mercy. Uh, so I like his music. Socially, he does actually sound somewhat conscious of things, and I'm glad to see that. However, personally, I don't know him, and maybe everyone is just a liar or exaggerating, but what are the chances of that? He just does not sound like the nicest person to work with, I guess. 13. What are your thoughts on modern goth bands who've come out since 2010? I really like them, actually. In fact, I think we're in kind of a golden age of goth music right now, except for Witch House. I really like a lot of bands. Most of the goth music that I've been listening to lately has been new bands, and the only reason that they aren't on this list is because it just seemed a little weird that I would include some albums or bands that I've only known about for less than 2 years, as opposed to bands that I was listening to for over a decade. But maybe in a few years, some of the new bands will actually replace some of these older bands as my favorites. We'll see. Or maybe they won't and they'll just go downhill. 14. If you could start a goth band, what instrument would you play and what bands would you take influence from? Well, I'm a singer mostly, so I'd probably sing. But if we're talking actual instruments that aren't attached to your body, then the bass, obviously, and the theremin. I've only played the theremin once, but the theremin. As for influences, Christian Death, obviously, they're my favorite. And the Frozen Autumn, because I like that sound too. And I want to combine those two sounds because it sounds like it would be cool to me. And I know they're not a goth band, but Beach House, them too. I want to combine Christian Death, The Frozen Autumn, and Beach House. And we're going to have a bass and a theremin. And I'm not going to be playing it, but also a rock organ. And that's going to be my band. And me singing. Just those instruments: voice, bass, theremin, rock and roll organ. No other instruments, no guitars, no drums, no triangles, just those. That'll be my band. Anyways, that's the goth tag. I hope you liked it. I'm sorry to disappoint you with what a basic goth I am, but we can't all be interesting. This is why this is not a personal channel. This is why I just talk about music. Because I'm boring, not because, I care so much about the music. I mean, I do, but ultimately, I know I'm not a very interesting person, as you can now see. Thank you. Join me next time with whatever I do next. My life is a little weird right now, so I don't know how soon my next video will be, but we'll see. Bye!